Hello, welcome to Headline Buster. Last week, one audience asked Jane who is the most handsome host at CGTN, and this week we have the most handsome host coming to our show. It is. Hello, Guan.
Hey, how are
Hi.
you? Good
How
to
are
see you.
you?
Thank you
Good
for
morning.
this card. How's
So,
everything?
yeah, I'm good. So this is your first time coming to our show. How do you feel so far?
Love it. I love the team. They only made me rehearse 4 times. I
So
love the team. Very professional. It's a big team, very efficient. And also Shinji is my friend. In case you don't know, she has been as much a friend as a mentor, a colleague. So it's always a pleasure to sit in for her.
okay, so are you nervous? Because this is your first time coming to Helen
A
Buster.
little bit, because I've got to remember all the marks where I'm gonna walk. A little nervous. I'll see how it goes.
Okay. All right. So don't be nervous. I hope you have a great time.
Alrighty.
Yeah. So I gotta go.
Thank you for
And
the intro, though. I overheard it. Thank you. That's
do you agree with me?
it's hard to say. I mean, we got Zhou Shu, right? So thank you.
Okay. All right. Good luck. High five. High five. All right. Okay. So Guan is ready, and I'm going to the director.
那虚拟没问题了吗？好，准备了啊，准备啊。
Guys, welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. I'm Wang Guan, sitting in for Liu Xin. Now, in this series, we take a look at stories making headlines around the world and talk to my guests to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. So join us in real time by sending us your comments or questions via the CGTN webpage on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN app, email us at thepoint with alex@cgtn.com. Let me know what you think. Now, we start our live streaming, as many of you know, every Friday at 11 a.m. Beijing time. Get in touch, and we just might read out your comments. Before we get to today's topic, some comments we've received so far from our viewers like you via social media. YouTube user Jay Cobham says, China hates the US, always have, always will. There's no need for any further dealing with each other. Time is for total separation. Wow. No shared values or goals, so there is no future for the relationship between the US and China. Separation or war, there's no longer any other possibilities. Now, YouTube user Edgar says this: the US media always know when to choose sides and who to side with, and they do it with subtlety and aplomb like no other media around the world. The US media can always be counted on to do the US government's bidding. Now, Twitter user AlexSpring17 says, we both know it's all about the election. If Trump really cares about national security, he would have done something in the early days of his administration. Personally, I think that China card is more or less the only card he has to play. We really appreciate all your comments. Keep them coming, please. This week, we are looking at media coverage on the delay of Hong Kong's 7th term Legislative Council, also known as LegCo, originally scheduled for September 6th. Now, it's delayed by a year due to a surge in COVID-19 cases in the city. Now, on Tuesday, China's top legislature voted to adopt a decision for the 6th LegCo of the Hong Kong SAR to continue performing its duties. The decision was made after Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR, Carrie submitted a report to the Central People's Government on July 28th on matters concerning the postponement, and asked the central government in Beijing to request the NPC Standing Committee to make arrangements handling the vacancy of the LegCo incurred due to the postponement. The postponement comes a day after Hong Kong authorities disqualified 12 candidates from the upcoming elections on the grounds that they were not fit to run for office. The decision was made in line with Hong Kong's mini constitution, the Basic Law, according to the statement. Now, The developments have been met with controversy, of course. The Five Eyes Alliance, for example, released a joint statement on the topic on August 9th that says, "We, the foreign ministers of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, and the United States Secretary of State are gravely concerned by the Hong Kong government's unjust disqualification of candidates and disproportionate postponement of Legislative Council elections. These moves have undermined the democratic process that has been fundamental to Hong Kong's stability and prosperity," unquote. That is, of course, the statement from Five Eyes Alliance. With everything else going on in Hong Kong, sanctions, high-profile arrests under the region's new national security law, it is, of course, easy for some critics, however, to accuse the government of Hong Kong of using the pandemic as an excuse to keep people from voting in the midst of a politically sensitive time. But here's another way to look at it. Hong Kong is currently battling what's being called the third wave of COVID-19 infections, with a total of 4,243 cases reported as of August 12th. On Wednesday alone, 62 new infections were confirmed, marking the 10th straight day of double-digit increase to its total, after a 12-day run of triple-digit surges. So far, over 60 people have unfortunately and tragically died. Now, the number of cases is low compared to some other places, yes, but the spike has raised fresh concerns, and the leadership in Hong Kong is doing what they can to contain the virus. For example, at the request of Hong Kong SAR government, the first batch of mainland professionals already arrived in Hong Kong in early August to join the anti-pandemic fight. In addition to that, 5 million people are expected to take part in a massive voluntary coronavirus testing program, according to the city's health minister. Last but not least, a 500-bed temporary hospital has been set up mainly to treat COVID-19 patients with mild symptoms or those still waiting to be admitted to hospital. From the very beginning, in fact, Hong Kong has taken the virus seriously. Now, this is interesting. In early February, the Hong Kong SAR government took measures to curb the inflow of travelers from the mainland by closing several border checkpoints, suspending ferry and cross-border train services, and reducing flights later on. More stringent measures, including social distancing and quarantine, were also introduced and carried out. Now, postponing the election of LegCo, Hong Kong's legislature, has been another such move. Regarding the decision, Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie had said she would invoke emergency powers to postpone the elections. Let's listen to what she said.
押後4年一度嘅立法會換屆選舉。
Now, the Legislative Council General Election is held once every 4 years. It is a really tough decision to delay it, but then we want to ensure fairness, we want to ensure public safety and health, and also we need to make sure that the elections are held in an open, fair, and impartial manner. So this decision is therefore essential.
Of course, this is a big decision, a decision not without its controversy. And the point of today's discussion is how are the news media globally covering the decision? Let's first take a look at this Guardian report with a headline from July 31st that reads, "Concern as Hong Kong postpones elections for a year, citing COVID-19. And the decision is an assault on fundamental freedoms," says Hong Kong Watch. As democracy deteriorates. As you can see, a critical opinion was quoted up front, setting the tone for the whole report. The opening paragraph starts off by saying this: "The Hong Kong government has postponed its upcoming elections for 1 year, citing the growing coronavirus outbreak in the territory, but sparking immediate accusations that the pandemic was being used as a pretext to suppress democracy." Carrie Lam's opinion was quoted where she said she, quote, had invoked colonial-era emergency regulations to delay the September 6th vote to September 5th, 2021. That is a year from now, saying it was the hardest decision she's ever made in the past 7 months, but had the full support of the Chinese central government. Now, when the article describes Lam's response to accusations that the delay had been labeled as an assault on fundamental freedoms, it says, in an increasingly defensive tone, Lam told the press conference there was definitely no political consideration to decision, and which had nothing to do with the likely outcome of this round of elections, referring to speculation that pro-democracy parties would win a majority. And then it gets interesting. The article goes on to pack the piece with comments from people with the same opinion. It quotes analysts from NGOs based in London and New York, but some commentators point out that the article would have been more convincing if it has talked to people who are actually from or live or vote in Hong Kong. The article does quote the high-profile activist Joshua Wong, who was disqualified from running in the LegCo election. Rather than talk to a public health expert or an actual voter in Hong Kong, the article goes on to quote Chris Patten, the last British governor of Hong Kong, who says, quote, "The national security law is being used to disenfranchise the majority of Hong Kong citizens." As you can read, it is obviously now illegal to believe in democracy, although this was what Beijing promised in and after the joint declaration. This is the sort of behavior that you would expect in a police state, unquote. It is interesting to hear Lord Patten lecture the world on democracy and disenfranchisement, given the fact that he was never elected to his post as governor of Hong Kong by anyone, but rather appointed by the British monarch back when Hong Kong was one of the monarch's colonies. Now, let's not forget that these governors sent from the UK were historically made president of the LegCo and appointed most, if not all, of the members of the colony's legislature. Now, our next example comes from the Washington Post on July 31st. The headline says, "Hong Kong leader postpones elections, further eroding political freedoms." Well, reading the headline, it is hard not to think that the verdict is already in. And there's no mention of the public health concerns linked to the delay. The opening paragraph said this, quote, "The Hong Kong government said on Friday it would delay Legislative Council elections for a year because of the coronavirus pandemic, undermining one of the few partially democratic institutions left in the Chinese territory as Beijing tightens its grip," unquote. But this article did not mention the surge of new cases over the past month or the strict measures Hong Kong has been taking since the beginning of its outbreak to prevent the spread of the virus. Later on in the article, it mentions Hong Kong's third wave, but only in the context that epidemiologists have said the daily cases will likely drop in about 4 to 6 weeks, which seems to suggest that Carrie Lam's decision cannot be justified. He also argues that in the absence of September election, now Hong Kong's Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the makeup of the 70-seat council will be decided by Beijing until new elections are held. Well, the only thing is, as the article itself says, only half of the 70 seats in Hong Kong's Legislative Council are directly elected. So it's not as if Beijing would reshuffle the entire council, as this sentence makes it sound. Regardless, there has been an update on the issue. China's top legislature on Wednesday announced that after September 30th, the 6th LegCo will continue performing duties for no less than a year until the 7th LegCo starts its four-year term. So the current council will stay put until the next election. Now, we see a familiar pattern here when it comes to the opinion portion of the article. Again, Joshua Wong, the same NGO spokespeople were quoted, and on top of that, the White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany. It is a complicated issue for sure. Public health and politics, the ongoing entanglement. A scholar quoted in the recent BBC article sums up the paradox pretty well. Eugene Tan, a law professor and political commentator at Singapore Management University, said that if you delay elections, you could be accused of waiting for a more favorable time for the government, but if you go ahead, you could be accused of playing fast and loose with people's lives. The worst thing would be to have an election and then have a spike in the number of cases, unquote. It's important for people to get clear ideas of the issue from both sides. With that, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll talk to our guests about the media's take on the delayed elections and other major developments in Hong Kong. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hong Kong will now be treated the same as mainland China. No special privileges, no special economic treatment, and no export of sensitive technologies.
Well, I think there is a whole chain of public comments made by not only Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, but also the FBI, etc., etc. All these has given a line that they don't like what is happening in Hong Kong, and that they feel that they have a right to comment on all these issues. China's stance is, of course, that this is a domestic sovereign issue, and is nothing for foreigners to comment on. The background to this is that America is going through a very traumatic time, and that particularly also, this is also in the run-up to the elections. So it is quite understandable that there is an effort to shift the blame on the mishandling of the pandemic to outsiders. So they would tend to blame China, they blame foreigners, they blame immigrants, etc., etc. So if you think about it, the United States has already lost 150,000 people due to the pandemic, and at the rate of 1,000 deaths per day, the number of deaths by the end of the year for the United States alone could be more than just under 300,000, which is larger than the total number of deaths America incurred during the whole of Second World War. In many cases, could be avoided, but unfortunately mishandled. So Hong Kong has become collateral damage in the worsening of the US-China relations.
Hong Kong will now be treated the same as mainland China. No special privileges, no special economic treatment, and no export of sensitive technologies.
Well, I think there is a whole chain of public comments made by not only Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, but also the FBI, etc., etc. All these has given a line that they don't like what is happening in Hong Kong, and that they feel that they have a right to comment on all these issues. China's stance is, of course, that this is a domestic sovereign issue, and is nothing for foreigners to comment on. The background to this,
I can't hear anything, but that's probably
America is
okay.
going through a very traumatic time, and that particularly also, this is also in the run-up to the elections. So it is quite understandable that there is an effort to shift the blame on the mishandling of the pandemic to outsiders. So they would tend to blame China, they blame foreigners, they blame immigrants, etc., etc. So if you think about it, the United States has already lost 100.
Guys, welcome back for more analysis and to compensate for the missing pieces of the puzzle. I'd like to bring in our guest today, Frank Surin, journalist and author. Also, Whitman Han, Hong Kong deputy to the 13th National People's Congress. And last but not least, Einar Tengen, current affairs commentator. Welcome, gentlemen. Frank, why don't I go to you first? Some folks are saying that delaying the election by 1 year, this is a bit long, right? You can do it by 1 week or 1 month or several months, but 1 year.
Yes, I think due to the circumstances here in Hong Kong, and I'm right now in Hong Kong for around 6 months already because I can't go back to Beijing. It looks a bit strange to me, actually, because I see every day people in the subways lining up. So I ask myself, why is it not possible to do elections probably with more precautions? Probably the election period would be a bit longer, or you do a delay for a month or two, because I think people want stability in Hong Kong, that's very clear, but they're also quite unsatisfied with certain political developments. And I think they don't feel very well concerning the idea that the election are delayed for such a long period now.
Well, Whitman, what do you think? I mean, you're in Hong Kong, you're a deputy to China's National People's
I
Congress.
would.
What do you think? I mean, sorry, Whitman.
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree with the decision. I think it is the people's life and health and safety is the most important politics. At the end of the day, any election, any politics is just a means to the end. The end is to let people to have a good life, right? Whether it's living conditions, health condition, safety. So I'm actually quite amazed when you just read this Five Eye announcement. And yesterday I was reading the news that the New Zealand Prime Minister lady is suggesting they may delay their own elections, right? And in the UK, they also have delayed their elections. And we know that in Singapore, when they didn't delay, it was the number of cases surged during the campaigning and after the election. I think it's not just about the election day. Just to answer the other gentleman's question, it's not about one day. There's an election. Let's take more precaution. We're talking about campaigning. We're talking about gathering of tens and hundreds and thousands of people for election campaign. Okay, these things happen. If you do not allow people to do election campaign, then it's not a fair election. So I think if we consider all these cases as making that decision to postpone the election for 1 year, I think is totally understandable. Nobody knows. I mean, yes, the numbers may go down in a couple of weeks. It may come back. Yes, unless you can totally eradicate, or unless there is a vaccine, a proven vaccine that's available, we cannot underestimate the power of the virus.
Well, Einar, let me go to you. There are many factors at play, right? There was this introduction of the new national security law regarding Hong Kong, and the recent disenfranchisement, as some foreign media described it, or some 12 people were disqualified for running for office there. How do you look at all these factors coming into play, Einar?
Well, Hong Kong, I mean, it's amazing. There's just so much hypocrisy. It's really hard to know where to begin. I mean, remember, the basic laws were formulated on the model that the British had introduced, which basically gave whoever the Queen appointed absolute control of the colony. So this idea that somehow this is manufactured or delayed or, things, it's an internal matter at the end of it. Where I really see the hypocrisy, though, is in the journalism themselves. At this time, the freedom of the press and the necessity of the press reporting on stories is very much an important part of what's going on. But yet, what you see here are articles being out. That article by The Guardian, they didn't bother to even go through the motions of having a fair report. They didn't call anybody in China or in Hong Kong who could actually talk to these issues. I mean, this show, you have people who are voicing different opinions. That is the way it's supposed to have some sort of responsible journalism. This idea that everything that China does is wrong and that you don't have to report the other side is poisonous. It's the reason that we have these kind of divides. And it extends not only to China, but also to almost every other country, internally and externally. People see things in black and white because they're not willing to listen to the other side. There are valid points on both sides. People have to make up their minds. But if they are getting the kind of reporting that you showed, how can they possibly do it? It's an echo chamber for whatever biases that you have, one way or another. And that is really, I think, the crux here, that you cannot have this idea that the free press is under attack at the same time that you're not doing the job you're supposed to do.
Echo chamber it is. Frank, how do you look at the Western media coverage regarding the delay of Hong Kong's legislature?
Yes, I would wish as well a bit more balanced view. I regret that the imbalanced view on one side is causing imbalanced views on the other side as well. And then you have a kind of a situation where you don't really talk to each other. I think that's not a good situation. And I think it's quite important to see these events as well from a Chinese perspective, from a Hong Kong perspective. The media reporting could actually be a bit more balanced, but still, I would say there's a lack of analyzing on the ground here in Hong Kong. The whole discussion, for me, it's too much on above the heads of the people. And as I said, I think on one side, the people in Hong Kong here, and I studied it quite carefully the last 6 months, they want stability and they want their city to prosper. On the other side, they want to decide more and more in which direction Hong Kong should develop. They are not very satisfied with certain political developments. And at the end of the day, the politicians in Hong Kong and the politicians in Beijing need to balance these two kind of perspectives, because at the end of the day, I think Hong Kong is very valuable for the Greater Bay Area, actually, as it is now, with freedom of speech, with this rule of law, and so on and so on. And I think it should stay as valuable within the Greater Bay Area. And it's not by accident that the biggest financial market and the biggest stock market is right now in Hong Kong.
Well, talking about hearing the other side, let's hear from the other side. I want to show you this comment from, a Twitter user, Benedict Rogers, that says a postponement of Hong Kong's elections, especially for a year, would be an indicator that the Chinese Communist Party fears the ballot box. If Carrie Lam is about to announce this, it is a total scandal. The world must respond accordingly. Whitman, your response, your thoughts to all this, Whitman.
I think first of all, I just mentioned. I mean, the well-being, the health and safety of people is the utmost important thing compared with any others. And at the end of the day, whether it's election of a legislative council, or that matter any political activities, the purpose is to give our people a good living. Now, looking at the cases that surged to more than 100 cases in the past few days, and then now dropped to about 63 yesterday, it's still large. It's still huge. I mean, I just mentioned the New Zealand case, right? They had like 4 new cases, and the Prime Minister is already saying, oh, maybe we should delay the election. So I think on that decision, obviously my views is just one view. I want to comment a bit more on when you just talk about media. I'm actually very uncomfortable. One of my friends from the UK was sending me some articles from the Times the day before yesterday, my previous boss, and we were talking about this one-sided reporting. I think at the end of the day, as I mentioned, I think it was mentioned by a BBC guy a long time ago. Opinions are cheap. It's the facts that matter. Okay, so if somebody is going to report on the postponement of an election in Hong Kong, what they should do is compare with the other places in the world and how they handle elections. For example, in the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Singapore, any other places, okay? And even the United States. And then maybe do a scientific report on, number of confirmed cases before, during the campaign, and after the election in Singapore and other places where the election carried on.
Very
So
different
that is a
treatment
scientific.
of finding the balance regarding the pandemic and having elections over there. Different countries certainly took different approaches. Frank, our previous guest talked about the divide, the distrust among the general public in Hong Kong, the growing distrust, if you will, towards the SAR government. How do you think such divide can be bridged?
If people learn to see the world and each other perspective, which doesn't mean that I have to agree, but I think we need to learn to find out why certain decisions are made, and not only looking at the reasons we think are convincing, but looking at all the different reasons. And I think that would help to come to a more balanced view. For example, if you look at the cases in Hong Kong, then the cases per 100,000 people, they are lower than right now in Germany. In Germany, you have a normal life. In Hong Kong, you have a semi-lockdown. It doesn't mean that Germany is right and Hong Kong is wrong, or the other way around, but they're different perspectives. They're different even to deal with the health issue. So I think that's a quite important point, to understand the different perspectives, and probably for the Western media and for the Western people, elections by itself are more important, have a bigger value than probably for the people in China.
Great. You know what? I want to bring in our viewers' comments as well, as we're streaming online and via social media. Dale Brennan, a friend from Facebook, says, don't worry about what they, meaning America, will say. They will attack and attack, for they want to get the election swings in their own countries by using anti-China rhetoric. Einar, let me go to you. Do you see Hong Kong and, by that measure, Taiwan becoming pawns in America's, foreign policy? Because after all, foreign policies are considered extensions of one's domestic politics. Einar.
Absolutely. That was the word I would have used, pawns. I mean, the idea that Americans actually care about Hong Kong or Taiwan is ridiculous. If you go into any part of the United States and ask them, they wouldn't be able to tell you who's in charge, what's happening, what system they have, even what trade is involved. So this idea that there's an outpouring of liberal indignation at all these things is nonsense. Now, while Frank has a valid point, I would like to direct attention to the fact that in a democracy, the vote depends on the information that you're getting. And right now, as this program is showing, there's a one-sided stream of invective against the Chinese government, no matter what they do. The cold, hard reality of Hong Kong is that it's been under a year of turmoil. They've recently, the mainland, enacted law to make sure that this confusion and violence stopped. I think it's very good. I'm not saying that you should have done it politically, but I think it'll be very good for the voters to see what a year of peace and prosperity could look like, relative. I mean, you're still dealing with COVID-19. But this idea that you can have a, quote, fair and fundamentally good election based on faulty information is completely wrong. And this idea that that everything is set in stone and that you have to, quote, let the democratic process work out, well, we see that around the world. It isn't working out. You have leaders who seemingly don't give a damn about their countries. All right, they enact policies that are highly irresponsible. And just on basic things like health. I mean, well, what is wrong with wearing a mask and having a short period, 3 to 6 weeks of shutdown so that you avoid more economic pain and deaths? Why is that controversial? Why is it that Great Britain and the United States refuse to acknowledge that? They go ping-ponging back and forth on this. And to misdirect people, they started talking China, which has actually had one of the best records given the number of people that it has in the world.
An
This is the
educated
problem.
citizenry.
It has become an echo chamber.
Yeah, they consider educated citizenry is often considered the
Informed.
foundation of democracy, cornerstone of democracy. Our last question, Whitman. Let's be honest. There is distrust and dissatisfaction from some factions in Hong Kong towards the central government in Beijing. How can this distrust or mistrust be bridged?
I think it is very difficult, and we shouldn't be too optimistic about resolving in a short period of time. It took foreign forces and other people almost 20 years' time to change our education curriculums, to erode our media, and to affect our youth. Okay, it took them 20 odd years to do that. So try to reverse that thing within 12 months, I don't think is possible. What we need to do is help those who are willing to get help, have a stable environment, let people feel about it, do get rid of all the foreign intervention according to the new law. So at least we know when people are throwing millions or tens of millions of US dollars coming into subduing our government, we know, and at least we stop those things. Okay, and then of course the SAR government itself needs to be more, I would say, down to earth, need to understand the real requirements and try to, I'm not sure reform is the right word, but I would say it should reform, the way they collect public opinions, the way they communicate with most Hong Kong people in the social media days, the way they appoint people. I mean, some of these things needs to be changed, but it can't, I do not think changing that will have an effect immediately, but it has to be done anyway because it will be to the betterment of Hong Kong. As for the correction of the mistrust, I think it just take a longer period of time.
I think at least all of us can agree that both sides need to listen to each other more. I want to thank all of our guests for today, Frank Surin, based in Hong Kong, Whitman Han in Hong Kong as well, and Einar Tengen, current affairs commentator in Beijing. Thank you also very much. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Headline Buster. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. I want to thank all of our viewers in China and around the world for tuning in. Keep your comments and suggestions coming. I'll see you again next time.
Comments.
Hi. Hi, Guan.
Hi there.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Are you okay?
Fine.
How do you feel?
No drama. It was a good show. I think it was. I could have done better actually, but it's fine. It's a good show. Not bad at all. Thanks to our team. A great dedicated team over there. I want to show you our team over there too. Photographers. Yeah. Kudos to them. It's not easy. Television is not easy. Big operation. It's a team effort. So, yeah.
Alright, so are you ready to read some fresh comments?
Let's see what our viewers are.
No.
Which
It's
is
right
this
here.
one?
It's right here.
Let's see. What you got for me?
You can scroll. There are a lot of comments
Oh.
right there. Choose whatever you want to read.
China ignores US for now. They will stop barking when they feel tired and choke. Ooh. Pretty harsh, pretty insightful as well. I mean, personally, I do hope and I do think and I'm convinced that the two sides need to come together. I mean, I lived and worked in the US for 8 years and I see the, when the relationships come to fruition, students on both sides, people on both sides, businesses on both sides benefit. So I'm really worried about the current deterioration in tensions. Let's see. Support motherland China. Wow, lots of comments over there. China virus. Ooh.
No, every time we got
Wow,
China
I think
virus.
yeah. Well, I think this, you know what, this intensifies the stereotype. Even the moderates and liberals in America, they're totally against the labeling of coronavirus as China virus or whatever virus because it's really unhelpful. It's really unhelpful. Staying strong, China. Okay. India forgot it. I'm not sure. If today's topic has a whole lot to do with India, but I want to thank our friends in India for tuning in. Thank you for your dedication, CGTN. Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you. What else? Chat, stop being so mean. Yeah, I mean, there's some mean comments, but you know what? That's the state of affairs these days. You post any comments and every comment online, and you cannot stop people from voicing their opinions. CGTN is doing a great job. Yes. Thanks, CGTN tells the truth. Appreciate it. Wow, lots of them. Lots of them. So fun. So I had fun doing this. Have me back again, please.
Okay, so maybe we will see you next week.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay.
See you next week.
See
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.